Today's video is sponsored by Bluetele, the ultimate in IT asset management. For more details, visit them today at blueteleapp.com. In this video, we're going to take you on a journey into security in Microsoft 365 and give you tips and tricks on how you can be more secure. And it won't cost you a fortune either. Check it out. Greetings fellow YouTubers, how are you today? Welcome to the channel. I really do appreciate you joining, especially a big hello to my new Patreon members. I really do appreciate you joining me and for your support. On today's episode, I thought I'd talk about security. It's something that concerns us all. And it's something that we really do need to pay attention to. And it's so easy for the bad guys to take advantage. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you a series of top tips and tricks on how you can be secure in the most cost-effective way and really get the most out of your Microsoft 365 subscriptions. And I'm going to be talking about various subscriptions as well, including the Business Premium and some of the e-plans as well. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, well, hell, come on board. I'd love to see you. Bump the subscribe button up there, ring that bell, and come and join our great learning community. And if you would like a little bit more, then why not sign up to my Patreon site? Here you'll get access to full courses as well as that monthly Zoom call. So without any further ado, I think it's about time we jump in and take a look at some of these cool security features. Check it out. So the most common questions that I get asked in YouTube are, how do I become secure, or how can I keep my organization secure without spending a fortune? So in this demo, I've got a couple of tenants open. I've got my own tenant actually, which is running Business Premium. And I've got this tenant here, which is an E5. But everything I'm going to show you is available in both tenants. So irrespective if you're a small business or you're a large enterprise, you're going to get the advantage of this. Now, one of the key things, or the first things that I would go for is, first of all, do I know if I'm being hacked or not? Andy, how do I know that? How do I know if I'm getting attention to the bad guys? So to do that, I simply come up to my profile picture here. I'm currently logged on as Megan. And if I go into my account, in my account here, this is all the details about your account with Microsoft. So, for example, what apps do you have access to, the organizations that you have a relationship with, and of course you can see that we also have my sign-ins here, both here and across here on the left-hand side. So if I click into my sign-ins, typically it will show me where I'm signing in from. Now this particular tenant, I'm currently in the UK, and I'm just going to collapse down some of these entries, and you can see here it's probably coming from a fairly local place, and this looks good. So it tells me where I'm coming in from, the operating system. I'm using a Mac, and I know I've heard all the stories about a Microsoft guy using a Mac. Remember, I'm a cloud guy, not a Windows guy. Again, the IP address where I'm coming from, I'm using a Microsoft account, and you can see the name of the account there. Now it looks all nice, and it says you have a successful sign-in. So I can scroll down here, and ultimately what I'm looking for is I'm looking for unsuccessful sign-ins. Now in this case, I've created an unsuccessful sign-in, but what you're looking for is to go in here, and you'll see that, of course, your email address is public. Anybody can know that, but they don't know your password. And in this case, I'm using multi-factor authentication, which is absolutely awesome. So the first thing you need to do is you need to determine your recent activity. Now, from an admin perspective, you can also do this. So if I'm just going to close this down here, and what I will do is from an admin, I can come into the identity portal here in Entra ID. So in Entra ID, let me just make that a little bit bigger for you there. You can scroll down into the portal here, And if you click onto more, you'll see that we've got monitoring and health, and sure enough, we have our sign-in logs. And these will give you all the logs from your various users. So again, I can click onto the log and you can see it gives me similar information, but I've got location, where the location is, who's the user, what they're signing in from, the location where they are, the device information that they're using, the authentication, so how they're authenticating, and of course, if conditional access is hitting them. Now, conditional access is an awesome set of tools, and this is included with P1. So if you've got a business premium or E3 or E5, you get this feature out of the box. And I'm going to give you a demo of conditional access in a moment. But the key thing is know where your logs are and really kind of understand those logs. Okay. Now, on the subject of logging, here's a little mystery for you. If I come into the Office portal here, I'm going to come down here, and if I go into, let's say, reports, and if I go into, say, a usage report here, it's always nice to know how heavy the usage is with a particular user, who are the heaviest users in your organization. So if I click into the report, you can see that it gives me a lot of, well, it's not very clear. In fact, the reason for this is many of the reports in Entra and Azure and Microsoft 365, these, for privacy reasons, they're anonymous. Now, you might think, well, that's not very useful, and how do I change it? Well, it's simple. Simply come down into your settings. If you go into your organization settings, if you scroll down, there is an option down here that says reports. And if you click into this, and you can see it display concealed user and group names, simply take that checkbox out, click on save, and you should now be in a good place. So I'll just pop back and let's go back to this. So I'm going to go back to that usage report. If I scroll down, now I have a look, and sure enough, you can now see the name of the user. How cool is that? So next on my list is probably the most important option. It's configuring multi-factor authentication. Now, you can configure it here in Entra ID, or you can configure it in Microsoft 365, whichever you prefer. So to configure it in Microsoft 365, Microsoft make it super easy for you. So I can come into, for example, active users here, and you can see that I can say, yeah, I want to go ahead and push out multi-factor authentication. So what this does is it starts a process, a series of actions. And what I can do is I can say, yeah, okay, I want to go ahead and I want to get started on this. It explains all about what the template is and what it does. And now essentially what we need to do is walk through this little wizard. Okay, so here we are, and you can see it's starting this wizard process. So it's going to take us through MFA, and it's going to say, why is it really important? I can tell you personally that if you enforce MFA within your organization, multi-factor authentication will reduce your phishing attacks by up to 99%. Can you imagine that? 99%. It's absolutely huge. Now, in addition, you can also configure something called adaptive MFA in conditional access. So what I thought I would do is I thought I'd show you how to do it in 365, and I'm going to show you how to do it in Entra ID. So typically, we then choose our authentication method. So here you can see that these two are already pre-selected. So using FIDO and Microsoft Authenticator, in other words, biometrics. This is sometimes referred to as phishing resistant technologies. We can also use kind of medium level security. So for example, an OAuth token or a temporary access pass. And low security is SMS. Now, To be honest, Microsoft are scaring you a little bit here. These authentication methods are vulnerable to SIM or other hacking methods. Now, that means that a hacker would need to have physical access to your device. They couldn't perform this type of attack remotely. Okay, so they kind of scare you in a little bit here. So anyway, I can choose one of these. Now I'll click on next, and you can see that by default, it's saying, hey, do you want to go ahead and use an MFA template? So of course, I can choose to customize that if I want to, but if I don't, click on next, boom, and that will be rolled out to all of my users. So that is how you can do it in Microsoft 365. There are some really nice training resources here. For example, there's an email that generates a message to your organization, tells you how it works and so on. And you can also ask for assistance from Microsoft's Fast Track team. Now, in addition, if I come into Entra ID, I'm going to come down into the Protection tab here, and I'm going to come into Conditional Access. Now, we also have a feature here called Identity Protection. I've covered this in videos before. Identity Protection, first of all, it requires a P2 license. And so if you're Business Premium or something like that, you won't have access to that. But it's okay. It's okay. So conditional access, in my opinion, is a core component in Microsoft's Zero Trust strategy. So typically here, I really like configuring conditional access here rather than through that wizard in Microsoft 365. You've got a lot more control here. So for example, one of the first things that you would do is think about your team that work with you. You typically wouldn't want them to, for example, if they're in the office, constantly have to sign in through MFA. That would be a bit of a pain, right? So what we can do is we can either do it by geolocation. You can add in an IP address range, for example, your Bergen office or your Glasgow office or whatever. Or you can also configure multi-factor authenticated trusted IPs. Now, of course, if you're not too technical, then a Microsoft partner can help you with these. Alternatively, you could go ahead and just use that wizard in Microsoft 365, and that keeps it simple for you. So you can see I've got a couple of trusted locations, and I've added in Norway because it's a safe place, and I've added in a couple of IP addresses and so on. Now, the other thing that you would do here is you can also configure what we call a terms of use. So think about it. Anybody who's connecting to your network, they'll get this little pop-up message that basically says, hey, these are our terms and conditions. You can upload this via PDF. And, you know, these are our terms and conditions. This is our acceptable usage policy. Do you consent? So you can force the user to consent and expand the menu. This is a really nice feature, and you can then deploy a template on from that. So that's the terms of use. Really important, by the way. The next thing then, remember those authentication methods. So just before you get into conditional access, you can also come into the authentication methods here, and you can choose which methods you're going to authenticate. Now, if you're not sure, then you can go to learn.microsoft.com, and there are some great articles on each of these. Bearing in mind that FIDO keys are soon to be renamed as smart keys, yes? So you got the Authenticator app there. So for example, if I click into this is super easy. I just enable it for all users, and again, I'll configure it. So it says here, do you want to enable a one-time passcode? So I'm sure you're familiar with this. It will ask you to put in number 25 or whatever it is. Then it will ask you what's the application name. Now, some people hide this stuff. I really think it's a good thing because, hey, if you get a sudden pop-up message that says, hey, are you in Adelaide, Australia using Microsoft Teams? You know that somebody's trying to hack into your account. All right. And you could just say, no, that's definitely not me. So you've got that geographic location. These are three really super important components in protecting yourself here. All right. So those are your authentication methods. As again, SMS and voice call are probably the weaker ones of the bunch here. But again, things like Microsoft Authenticator, again, multi-factor authentication using two-factor authentication or more is definitely the way to go here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop over to my own tenant here. And you can see Microsoft are currently pushing out at the moment. If I come into policies, they're currently pushing out what we call Microsoft managed policies. So there are two policies that they're trying to push out. And one is multi-factor authentication for admins accessing the Microsoft admin portals. Very good security. The other one is multi-factor for all users. So again, these are two policies. Now, if you don't want them and you've got your own policies, again, you're quite within your right to go and delete them or disable them. Now, you can see that these are running in what we call, in fact, if I click onto this one here, you can see that it's running in what we call reporting only mode. Now, just to show you that reporting only mode actually runs for 90 days. So anything after 90 days, it would then come in and be active. So just be aware of that. These policies, these Microsoft managed policies are currently being deployed. Okay. Now, you can either create a policy from scratch, as I said, or you can create a policy from a template. Now, depending on your license, you might have more templates than others. But you can see that these are typically in different categories. So zero trust, for example, remote work, protecting administrator accounts, and so on. Now, again, you can use those ones if you want to. So you can create that template. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to say, I actually want to go ahead and create a policy on my own. So not to damage my own tenant, I'm going to flip back onto this one here. And you can see here that I'm now going to create a new policy from scratch. So I'm going to call this my Budapest conditional access policy. Okay. And what users or groups do I want to affect with this policy? So again, I'm going to select some users, and you can do a policy for guests. I can also do one for directory roles, for example, admins and so on. But this time, I actually want to create a policy for users and groups. So I happen to have a group here called Budapest Sales. So I'm going to click into Next and select that group. And conditional access is based on signals. So with these signals, I've said, okay, if the user is a member of this group and they're accessing all apps, cloud apps, of course, then they must meet these conditions. Okay. Now, user risk and sign-in risk, if you have a P1 license, will not be available, but that's fine. Device platform. So again, I can click yes. And I'm going to allow any device except Windows Phone, because let's face it, the only person that would use one of those is Doc and Marty. So I'm going to click on Done. I'm going to say location. Now I'm doing a multi-factor authentication policy here. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to configure the policy, but I want to exclude trusted locations. Do you remember that? So that means that if you're in the Berlin office or wherever you are, it won't prompt you for MFA. Once you've done that, I can click on Client Apps and I can say, okay, and very important for security, and this will make you so much more secure, browser apps, and mobile apps. Now, these are modern authentication clients. And what this means is they support multi-factor authentication. They support biometrics, unlike older applications that don't. So one of the first things that you might do is disable these, because these only support passwords. Now, of course, you could create a separate conditional access policy for those, and I do recommend that. But in this case, I'm just going to accept that. And finally, we have something called filter for devices. So, and this is really nice because you can say, hey, a manufacturer, let's say, equals, or let's say equals, and let's say Dell, okay? And I'll say, okay, add an expression, and I'll say, hey, if the model contains XPS, okay? And you can then add the model number. You can say if it's personal or if it's business. Do you get the idea? So you could actually lock your system down so much that only these devices can be connected. How cool is that? So those are the signals, conditional access. Then I'm going to say, okay, am I going to grant access? I am going to grant multi-factor authentication. And again, you can determine whether if you've got a device that's managed, for example, you could check that the device is marked, that it's not, for example, out of date with software or anything like that. And then finally, I really like this, you can control the session as well. So you can, I'm just little things here, like you can control the sign-in frequency for this. So I can say, you know, I want the user to re-sign in every 3 days or every hour. Or you could even say, I want them to re-sign in every time. Imagine if you worked in a bank, for example. Okay. The other thing, you can also control the persistent browser session. So have you ever signed into a browser and it says, hey, do you want to keep me signed in? So again, there may be occasions where you never want them to be persistent. Okay. Again, in a sensitive position. Okay. We also have a feature called CAE. Again, this may not be available with all versions, but CAE, or Continuous Access Evaluation, constantly monitors your systems for anomalies. So it works with all the other secure systems, and it basically says, hey, anything, just re-prompt the user to be re-authenticated. So it doesn't log you out. It just says, hey, can you re-authenticate, please? All right. So again, really, really nice feature. Okay. Okay, so there we go. That's a really super feature. Again, depending on your license, some of these may or may not be available to you. Now, when you create the policy, as I said, it comes in reporting only. And that means it comes on for 90 days, and then it will go into active use. So it's a way of trying before you buy, okay? Or you could just switch the policy on, of course. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and create it. Okay, so there we have it. Conditional access. Really cool. So 2 different ways of deploying MFA. So you can deploy it either through the slightly more technical way of conditional access, or you can deploy it through this little wizard here, which you can find in the user portal in Microsoft 365. So now I'm moving over to the Defender portal, and you can get to this by simply clicking on the security pane in Microsoft 365 or by navigating to security.microsoft.com. Now in here you'll find everything that you need to help your business become secure. So what we've done in the last section, we've talked about really improving security for users, getting those users in. And of course, it's not just a case of signing in, but conditional access provides additional layers of security. So before you can get access, you have to meet multiple requirements. Now, in terms of security here, this is a fantastic tool. So I can come into, for example, threat analytics, and threat analytics shows me or educates me as to what are all the latest potential threats out there. So if you've got individuals in your organization who are, pretty proactive in terms of security, this can be a great insight. So for example, any kind of new dangerous tools, it will let you get details from the analyst, what the tool actually does, how it manifests itself in your organization. Do you have any incidents with this? Do you have any impacted assets? And do you have any exposed endpoints? So potential areas of exposure where this type of threat could obviously take effect. And we also have kind of recommendations as well. Again, this depends on the actual alert, but really, really useful. So definitely go in, and you need to have a knowledge of, first of all, being able to defend these threats, but you need to know what these threats are and what to look out for. So that, again, really, really important. Now, Defender for Endpoint, of course, I'm currently in, this is Business Premium. So if you're a small business, up to 300 users, this is perfect. And one of the great things about this is it also comes with Defender for Endpoint. So Defender, of course, is Microsoft's umbrella name for all of its security features. Now, you can see here that at the moment, I don't have any devices in. But how do you get devices in, I hear you ask? Super simple. You simply go down to the bottom of the page, click into Settings here, click onto Endpoints, and if you scroll down, there's an onboarding section here. You simply choose the device that you want. You can see there's a whole bunch of them. Download that agent, and you then essentially download it, and you can install that app or that tool. Now, one of the things you can also do is there's a little test here that you can run in PowerShell. Andy, I don't have PowerShell. But yes, you do. So if you come into the admin center here, up here, you have got something called Cloud Shell, and this will allow you to run that command. And what that does is it just sends a pulse out, essentially waking that sensor up. And once you've got the sensor running, it will obviously then start collecting data, and then you'll be able to see that data in Defender for Endpoint. So really, really useful. Now, one of the annoying things that really annoys me about Microsoft is you'd think that if the tool or the feature is not available in the product, that it just doesn't appear. But unfortunately, it does appear, and it's really quite frustrating. So you can see that you've got Defender for Cloud Apps here, but if you've got a P1 license, when I click onto that, it basically gives me an error and it says it's not available. But hey, would you like to upgrade? Very clever on behalf of Microsoft. Okay, so again, once you've onboarded those devices, from the home page, it will then just show you how many devices are compliant. For example, do any devices need patched or updated, and so on. Really, really useful, and it definitely gets your security up and running. Finally, the last thing here is Secure Score. So Secure Score, what this does is it compares your score with those of your, let's say, for example, industry peers. And what it does, it makes a number of recommendations. So for example, one of the really cool features of a P1 license or a business premium license is that they give you additional security features. So think about, where's the bad guys going to come from? They're going to come from typically identity hacks. But if you've deployed multi-factor authentication, You've improved that by 99%. So what else can we do then? Well, we've got email and collaboration. And in here, every customer, for example, if I go into threat policies here, every customer by default gets things like anti-phishing, anti-spam, anti-malware. So the usual stuff, okay? That's great. Every customer gets that. But what's really worth having is these two here. So these two come specifically with Defender for 365. And Safe Attachments, I gotta tell you, absolutely rocks, okay? And it's definitely something you want to switch on today. Now, this is available in most business plans, so Business Premium. Again, if you've got the lower plans, you might not get this, but it is available in the business plan. So I'm going to create a policy here. I'll just call this policy 1. Okay. And I'm going to click on next, and you can do it by users. I can add individual users in, groups of users, or your entire domain if I wanted to. So for the purpose of this demo, I've got a group here called sales and marketing, in fact, the sales team. And I want to create a policy for these guys. So you can see what we have is you've got essentially 4 options here. So off, obviously, if you don't want the attachments scanned. Monitor, so this perhaps you've got a, let's say an analyst in your team who's specialist in this area. You could forward any kind of dodgy attachments to him. He could analyze them and determine if they're dangerous, of course. So you've got monitor here as well. So this delivers the message if malware is detected, and this is quite useful for tracking the results. For example, if you've got an on-premises individual who is perhaps specialized in this area. Block does exactly as it says on the tin. It blocks this and all future messages with that attachments. And you've also got something called dynamic delivery, which I use. It's brilliant. So what this does, it delivers the message, it detaches the attachment, scans it, drops it into what we call a sandbox, and it checks the attachment. Does it contain an executable? Is it trying to write any code? Is it trying to do anything malicious? If it's not, it reattaches and resends the message again. However, if it is malicious, it just drops it completely. Absolutely brilliant. And it's an integral part of Microsoft's Zero Trust strategy. Definitely take a look at that. Safe Attachments, it absolutely rocks. And finally, what's the other way that potential malware or malicious software can come in? It's typically through potentially a malicious link. So we have this feature here called Safe Links. And again, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create a safe links. I'll just call this, again, I'm imaginative. So I'll call this policy 1. Okay. And in here, I'm going to say, okay, again, the same group again. So you can put in, different groups. You can have different policies, of course, for different groups of individuals. And I'm going to click next here. And you can see here what this is doing is it's checking every single link in every email message, every chat message in Microsoft Teams to make sure that it's not malicious. Now, you might receive an email that contains a link and you see like an orange or a yellow border around the message. That just means that it's being scanned, okay? If the border around the message is red, then you know that it was a malicious link, as this is typically how hackers essentially get in to your infrastructure. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I definitely want to switch that policy on. So absolutely brilliant technology. A few simple clicks can really improve security in your environment. So there you have it, just a few of those really important security settings in both Microsoft 365 and Entra ID that can make a real difference to your business. And I guarantee It will keep those bad guys away. Now, if you enjoyed the session, please give me a big thumbs up. Bump that like button. It does make a difference. And hey, if you've got questions, comments, get those down below and I'll do my best for you. Subscribers, if you want to join us, I'd love to see you on board. Bump that subscribe button, ring the bell, and come and join our learning community. That's it for today. I really appreciate the visit. I'll see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.